Sonic, you're listening to the voice of HGS.
All right, welcome to Sonic, everybody. Ahalya here, keeping you company, and I've got a fantastic conversation lined up for you as we continue the dialogue around Pride Month. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the role of storytelling and communication when it comes to having conversations around Pride and creating an environment of inclusivity, belonging, and diversity in the workplace. I've got with me the fantastic Aruna Ganesh Ram, who is the co-founder of Breath Beings, a DEIB specialist, a theater enthusiast, a performer herself, and helps brands and companies, organizations with creating inclusive, diverse, and workplaces that feel like people can belong in them. Welcome, Aruna. Thank you so much for being here with us, and really excited to get your thoughts on communication and storytelling and the power of it all in DEIB.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ahalya, for that compelling and wonderful and crisp introduction. And really, really happy to be here as part of Sonic today.
Perfect. So, Aruna, let's dive into a couple of questions that we have for you. I think one of the biggest buzzwords or buzz phrases, if I may, in the past couple of years has been, bring your authentic self to work. But I think it's a lot easier said than done. And I don't really want to, at this point, focus on why it's important to do that, but rather why people find it so difficult to do that, right? And a very pertinent conversation when it comes to, the LGBTQ plus community as well. Why do you feel, in your experience as a DEIB specialist, people often feel the need to hide parts of who they are at work? So what do you think holds people back the most?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. And I think you're right. Absolutely. I think organizations have spent time in saying, bring your whole selves, authentic selves. We also understand that on one side, people are saying, that having that whole personal side and professional side is gone. The boundaries between work and life are blurring, right? While all of these are statements, mottos, of sorts, it's important to know that when people do bring their whole selves, authentic selves, is there judgment? Do people feel like this is a safe space? I can really be who I am. Because when you look at it from an LGBT lens, coming out is not a one-day thing, right? It's an everyday process. And the minute I come out, right, it means that I have to put in everyday effort in being who I am. Right? And that's something that the LGBTQ plus community has to manage and deal with and navigate on an everyday basis, because people who are cis-het and identify either as man, woman in a social spectrum, they don't have to be talking about their gender identity or their sexuality on an everyday basis, right? So it's the effort that, is involved. So people are like, okay, maybe it's better if I just, keep it simple, if I just keep it, to what is required without really oversharing. That's one. Mm-hmm. Second is, once they've shared, what is the consequence of it, right? Just something as simple as a slight shift in gaze, right? The way people look at you changes. And the queer community understands this. They feel it, right? So it's not enough for anyone in the workplace to just say, hey, I'm a supporter, I'm an ally, I understand this, or I have friends from the LGBTQ community, right? The way they look at you after you come out to them, that really makes it or breaks it, right? So I think for queer folks to be their authentic selves, I think straight folks need to be their authentic selves first, which is to say that, hey, I don't know enough about LGBTQ, right? To demonstrate vulnerably that surprise, that curiosity, without, working with negative judgment. I think that's really the thing that organizations and employees within the organization need to work with for people to be able to be themselves.
So why don't we take that a step further, given all of your work with different organizations and companies, Aruna, what in your opinion are some crucial ways in which organizations, the people working within them, the systems and the structures can create spaces of belonging for their professionals?
Okay, thank you for that question. So, in my opinion, I think belonging is something that people feel, people experience, and therefore, as employees within an organization, we can program for diverse teams, we can program our own mindsets to be more inclusive, we can design for equity by looking at various rituals, processes that teams can apply and practice, but belonging is really, really felt. And like I said, it starts with gaze, it starts with the way in which you interact with people, and also to program for this inclusion mindset that may enable people to feel a sense of belonging. I think people first have to make a choice, right? And a choice to be a supporter, a choice to be an ally, a
Yeah.
choice to be a friend to the LGBTQ community, right? I think these are first starting points which will enable people to feel a sense of belonging. And if you ask yourself, right, where do you experience maximum belonging, right? If you ask me, I'd say that, I experience maximum belonging in a sports field, right? When I'm playing cricket or when I'm playing basketball or when I'm playing any kind of team sport, I feel like I experience maximum belonging. And why does that happen, right? Maybe because I feel that we're in this together, right? I feel like we're working towards a common goal. I feel like there is give and take, there is mutual respect, there's mutual admiration, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversation verbally, non-verbally. So if we can bring those aspects into the workplace, I think people will definitely feel and experience belonging.
That you yourself are a performer, right? You really do believe in the power of theater, storytelling, and all of these wonderful art forms. And I think it goes a long way, right, in being able to challenge stereotypes and really shift people's perceptions, biases, all of that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to the narratives around the LGBTQ plus community. So are there any sort of books or stories that you believe have really made an impact, one on you, but also that you think other people should read, watch, and, sort of be a part of that impact, the positive impact of communication and storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think storytelling, any form of communication where people put out their own lived reality, I think is super important for everybody to engage with, right? And the first book that I would recommend that you read is yourself, right? Because you are a living, breathing carrier of narratives, of experiences, right? The way you respond, the way you react, the way you engage with any piece of information that is new to you. Is there discomfort? Is there curiosity, right? Is there judgment? And I think that's the important starting point. And the first book to read is yourself, right? And now, with that awareness, I think, not just reading, but of course, trying to engage with the queer world in different ways is super important. Asking yourself, right? Am I following queer entrepreneurs, queer leaders, queer sports people on LinkedIn, on Instagram? That's the first starting point, right? Like they say, if you are what you eat, you are what you read. I also now have come to believe that you are who you follow, right, on your social media. So
Yeah.
I think like to follow queer folks, like, one of the people I follow is Alok Vaid Menon, who is a poet and an activist in the LGBTQ plus world. Their poetry is so compelling, and it gets you to think, it gets you to unpack who you are. I also love following Prarthana Prasad on Instagram, and the content, the storytelling blends comedy with slice of life reality. A book that I would recommend is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And Glennon talks about her journey discovering her own sexuality and what it means for you to go through that journey of acceptance and then to live your reality on an everyday basis. Of course, there are so many, other folks that I want to share as well, queer folks who really like rewriting narratives. And I think that if we're following, if we're reading, if we're listening, another podcast that I really love is Rainbow Diaries. right?
Mhm.
And this is something that, brings different perspectives of the queer world together into one place. So that's a definite go-to that I would recommend. But over and beyond all of this reading, I would encourage people to be collector of stories, a story gatherer, right? Like talking to queer people, understanding their lives, asking them questions. And queer people don't really shy away from questions, but they need to sense that your intent is in the right place. Because at
Right.
the end of the day, educating the world about queer people is not the responsibility of the LGBTQ plus community. We need to see allies also putting in that effort.
So at this point in the conversation, I want to hone in on your experience as a DEIB specialist with, organizations a little bit more, because so much of, workplace interaction and facilitating DEIB in the workplace boils down to behavior, right? So I want to give you a couple of scenarios, Aruna, and you go ahead and tell us how you would respond to them and also how you would suggest responding to them. So the first one is, I think, something maybe all of us have experienced. So imagine there's a group of teammates having lunch together, they're in the cafeteria and they're close, they hang out outside work as well. So they have a relationship that goes beyond just the professional. And one person one day opens up and shares to this group that they are bisexual, right? So for them in that moment, it's their moment of coming out to this group that they've known for a long time. So how can both the person coming out as well as the rest of the group handle this moment in a supportive and respectful way?
Important question. And first, like you said, it all depends on the relationship that people have.
Yeah.
But I think in situations, we always talk about normalizing coming out, right? So the first thing is, if someone's talking to you about their sexuality or their gender identity, the first thing to remember is it's hard for them to do this, right? The second thing to remember is that they trust you. That's why they're coming out to you and they're sharing this piece of information with you. So
Yeah.
what does it mean for you to hold that, right? You got to respond to sexuality and gender identity in very similar light, right? Of course, engage with curiosity. You're going to ask this person, hey, that's amazing. Tell me more. Or you could say, thank you for trusting us with this, right? We're here for you, right? And that's the first space. Because the minute you say like, okay, thanks for telling us, but your secret is safe with us. These are things that you should definitely avoid telling the person. So
Yeah.
the idea is normalize it. It's another piece of information that they're sharing with you because they trust you, right? And so
Yeah.
give that trust back.
Scenario number 2. So there's a new team member, right, at the workplace.
Right.
Now they're quiet, but they're very talented and very quickly, add a lot to the team. And I think their presence is very felt, right, in terms of professional contribution. But the thing is, they're very private about their personal life when it comes to being at work, right? However, a couple of weeks into their journey at the company, a co-worker mentions that they found their social media and actually really loved their posts. And those posts are very queer positive. Now,
Right.
after that, this person, they really just pull back into their own shell, become really distant with the team that they are in at the workplace. So how can the team, after recognizing this sort of shift in behavior, right, support them and help them feel comfortable again and, bring them back out of their shell?
Right. Yeah. I think there's a good dilemma built into that question is itself, right? Like if someone is comfortable talking about their identity, their sexuality on social media, it means they want to be out there. They want to be seen for who they are. They want to be heard. They want to be valued. They want to be respected. But if they're not able to bring that energy back into the workplace, what's happening in the space, right? And therefore, the responsibility of creating that safe space rests with the team, right? And also rests with cisgender heteronormative folks, right? And that's why we need allies, because allies are going to normalize this, right? And even if you know this, right, you're going to have to wait for the person to feel ready to come out. We cannot force this person. We cannot, say, hey, I saw you on social media, loving your queer friendly stories, but why don't you say much in the workplace, right? That's going to further put this person back into their shell, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is to examine is what is the team environment and what can we do to make it more psychologically safe.
For sure. Very important actually to turn the lens inward and really see, question why a person may be responding to an environment in a certain way. Last scenario for you, Aruna, to get your thoughts on. So let's say someone joins the team, right, in a client facing role and they prefer wearing gender neutral clothes, right? What can we do as a team, so on an individual and a collective level as a company, to make sure that they feel accepted and empowered to bring their authentic selves to work, because that really is a part of their authenticity, right?
I believe that your clothing, your style is also very much part of who you are.
Yeah.
Your persona, your attitude, and it's telling a story. And I think a great way to kind of normalize this is we see that organizations themselves today are creating a diverse dress code policy, right? So within the dress code, there's not just like one or two options for men, women, but they're saying, hey, you know what? These are multiple ways in which you can dress, right? So
Yeah.
the organization is creating a menu for that to happen. That's one. Second is, even if I now picked a more gender fluid dress from that particular menu and wore it and came, right? The people in the room, especially allies, need to step up and give a positive positive
Yeah.
compliment to that person, saying, you're looking vibrant today, right? This, what you're wearing is really suiting you, right? So when you positively compliment people for their dressing, people are going to observe it and say, oh, okay, I never thought of saying that. All right. Yeah, it's a bit different for me, but the more I see it, the more I get used to it. The more I get used to it, I become friendly with that kind of dressing style. And then, of course, there's the idea of being able to give positive compliments. So the job of the ally, therefore, is to give that positive compliment to that person who has chosen to dress in a gender fluid manner.
Yeah, nice. And make them feel supported, right? And encourage them to show up as they are and as they want to. Well, I think you've really given us, I think, I don't know, what stands out from this conversation is really practical ways that people can go about, creating inclusive, diverse workplaces. And I think pushing the needle towards a space of belonging, regardless of whether you're at home or at work. Thank you so much for being with us and taking us through all of it.
And thank you so much for threading this conversation together so beautifully, asking really compelling questions, and for keeping the energy of this show vibrant. So thank you as well, Ahalya.
Our pleasure, Aruna. Sonic team pleasure, and happy Pride to everyone watching.
Happy Pride.
Sonic, you're listening to the voice of HGS.